today's video is going to be the top 10 eyeshadow palette tag. I will leave whoever created this tag below. I can't recall her name right now, but I will definitely leave her name linked below, and I will leave her channel below. But some YouTuber did create this tag where if you could only keep 10 eyeshadow palettes, what would they be? I probably did film something like this quite a bit ago, and I said like what my favorite eyeshadow palettes were, like what my desert island palettes were, but I think my preferences have changed quite a lot ever since other eyeshadow palettes have come out. I feel like especially this past year in 2019, I think I definitely found some of my most holy grail eyeshadow palettes, because about 5 eyeshadow palettes that I had tried out this past year are in this video. So that comes to show you that I ended up trying some of my favorite eyeshadow palettes I've ever used. So we're just going to go through them. I'm just kind of going to go through the no-brainer palettes first. I think out of any palettes in my collection, these would be the ones that I literally would choose over anything else. I think I have 10 palettes here. I think I accidentally chose 11, so I might keep out one. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so 10. So obviously you guys know this is a no-brainer. I probably have talked about this palette to death, but honestly, if I didn't include it in this video, I'd be kicking myself, because this is one of my all-time, if not my favorite palette ever. And I'm obviously talking about the ColourPop and Kathleen Light's So Jaded eyeshadow palette. I just find if I took this palette with me traveling, I wouldn't need anything else. I could use this palette the whole time. If I traveled the world for like a month and I went to like 5 different continents, like Europe, Asia, whatever, I think that this would be the only eyeshadow palette that I would have to bring with me. That is how much I love this palette, because it's just so versatile, and it's just, there's so many different looks you can create out of this palette, because I feel like I could do a green look. I have greens in here. I have green mattes. I could do a blue look. I have a blue matte, and I have a couple of blue lid shades. I could do like a red look. I have a red lid shade, and I have a bunch of warm neutrals here. I could do a neutral look and use one of these, and I have a bunch of staple neutrals in here. There's just endless possibilities with this palette. I mean, I've done multiple looks multiple times with this palette, like the same look multiple times, and I just love how it turns out every single time. I just can't imagine my collection without this palette, and I can't believe that I was considering not getting this palette, but I definitely do not regret 100% getting this palette, because it is literally the best palette that ColourPop has ever come out with, and it's like become my favorite palette ever. So I definitely had to mention this first, because it's just such a versatile palette, and I feel like when I think of my favorite eyeshadow palette, or if I think of a palette that I don't know what to use, or I think of a palette that's like my favorite, this is always the one that I think of, and I just love it. It's just the best palette I've used from ColourPop. Every shade is amazing in this palette. I don't find one shade to be a dud in this palette. They're just all beautiful. I absolutely am in love with this palette, and I will continue to keep on using it. And I used the crap out of it last month. I haven't really reached for it this month, because I've been testing out the Storybook Cosmetics palette. But I freaking love it, and it shot up to the top of my list once I was able to test out all of the shades, and I love it. It's amazing. This is by far my favorite ColourPop palette, and probably my favorite palette of all time. So I, of course, had to mention that first. And the next palette I want to mention, of course, is my beloved Lime Crime Venus XL eyeshadow palette. This would be probably the only palette I would need from Lime Crime. I absolutely love Lime Crime's formula. Lime Crime makes amazing eyeshadow, Besides ColourPop and Natasha Denona, Lime Crime is like my other favorite eyeshadow formula. They just make amazing eyeshadows. Their mattes are ridiculously pigmented and their shimmers are beautiful. I would say I probably love their mattes more than their shimmers. I mean, their shimmers are beautiful, but their mattes are probably the best mattes that I've ever used. They blend so beautifully, but they are so pigmented. They're very similar to Anastasia mattes, but I find that when I use Lime Crime, they don't really muddy up like Anastasia mattes do. I find that they just stay super rich and pigmented, and they'll stay like that for the whole night or like the whole day, and they really won't fade too much. And this palette is just stunning. It's one of my favorite palettes ever. This was my Holy Grail palette before the So Jaded palette came out. This pretty much shot up to be my Holy Grail palette, so obviously I had to include this one too. You have so many beautiful different options in this palette. I just think it's such a well-curated palette. The only thing that I wish that this palette had was like a brighter inner corner shade. Like, I wish they would have thrown one duochrome pink in here, like a duochrome shimmer with like a pink shift. It would have been perfect to me. Or just like a pinky shimmery shade, like a light pink. Because the only one that is probably light enough for me to use on my inner corners is Ethereal. And that still is kind of too dark for my inner corners. So there really is no inner corner shade, but I feel like Passion and Triumph, I feel like one of those could have been opted out. Like maybe Passion, and you could have thrown in like a duochrome shimmer. But other than that, I absolutely love this palette. I love the color Love. I mean, they came out with this around Valentine's Day, so I think I'm going to use this as my Valentine's Day palette. I think I'm going to use this to create a look on Friday for Valentine's Day and also for a collab video that is coming up. I also just got my nails done and I got them Valentine's Day themed. I said in my live stream that I was going to go get my nails done, and because I was just over that color already. That color was not the color that I wanted, but at the same time, like, so many people said, oh, I love this color. Like, I got so many compliments on it. But I was like, I'm so over it. Like, I didn't like it because it wasn't the color that I wanted. But anyway, you can do neutral looks with this palette. You can do beautiful warm tone looks with this palette with these super, super rich mattes. You can also do a beautiful pink look with this palette with these wonderful pinky tones. You can also do, like, a really nice, it's just so beautiful. I know it might not be too versatile, but the looks that you come up with every time you use it, it's like the perfect neutral palette because it's like neutrals with like a twist, and they are just so stunning and beautiful to blend on the eyes. So I love this palette, and I think I'm going to use it maybe on Thursday to create my look. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to use this or the Storybook Cosmetics palette because there's still like 2 shades I have to test out. But they're just stunning. Like, I wasn't going to swatch too many things in this video, but this is my favorite shade in the palette, which is called Love. And it's just such a pretty bronze. And I also love... I mean, there's not too many favorite shades that I have in this palette because all the shades are amazing. My favorite matte is Burnt Gold. It's just, like, ridiculous, the pigmentation of these. And you can really tell more so on the eyes. Like, they might swatch a little bit patchy, but once you put them on the eyes, they are just so rich and pigmented. I also love Idolized. Like, their mattes are ridiculous. Like, some of the best mattes I've ever used before. I just think that they're stunning. And I'll just keep on using this palette for as long as I can. But I do need to whip it out and use it again. I haven't used it in a little while. Not since, like, before I got the House Laboratories palette. I think it was the last time I actually used it. So, anyway, love it. I also love that it has a brow bone highlight in it. I'm obsessed with it. I don't really know what else to say. I love Lime Crime eyeshadows. So, that is that one. And this would definitely be these would definitely be like my 2 ride or die palettes. If I only had these 2 palettes in my collection, I think I'd be okay. Like, I'm so confident to say that, like, this would be my neutral palette and this would be, like, my pops of color, but it also has neutrals in it. So, I really would be set with these 2. Like, these are my all-time favorites. Then, of course, let's go back to more ColourPop, but I can't really talk about ColourPop without mentioning my ColourPop Dream Street palette, which is also by Kathleen Lights. I know there's a lot of Kathleen Lights palettes in here, but I do really love her eyeshadow palettes with ColourPop. They always knock it out of the park every single time. But this was my first ColourPop palette, and honestly, it's still one of the best. I just find that, again, that this is a very versatile palette. It has a mix of the perfect amount of neutrals and the perfect amount of color, and I think that they did an amazing job with the color scheme in this palette, because I really thought that I wouldn't use these colorful shades all that much. I'm like, oh, there's a blue and a matte blue, but you can create so many beautiful looks with this palette. Like, I would use this one in the crease, or this one, and then I would darken it up with this one as the defining shade and then put that all over my lid, and it was so beautiful. Or you can make such a stunning, or I would put this in the crease and then put this on the lid, and it would be such a beautiful look. Or you can create so many beautiful neutral looks with this palette. You have some beautiful neutral shimmers in here. I use these 2 shades constantly on my lid, and I use these 3 mattes all the time, and I always use this on my outer corners, but I always find I'm like reaching for different neutrals in this palette, and I would have to say that this is still one of my favorite ColourPop palettes because I just know I can make such a beautiful neutral look out of this palette. So, and just throw one of the shimmers on the lid, and it really does create a beautiful look. It's just a staple neutral palette for me. But also, I would find that I would be satisfied if I just had this palette too in my collection, because there are some beautiful pops of color, and they did such an amazing job with the color scheme with only having 12 shades in here. I think that they created a really, really beautiful palette. Like, when I use this palette, it doesn't really leave me to desire to use any other shades in my collection except for like maybe a inner corner shade, but I love it. It's such a great palette. I think they knocked it out of the park with this one, and yeah, it's a great palette. So this is definitely one of my other staple palettes in my collection. And then the next one is one of my all-time favorites as well. This was my all-time favorite palette after the Dream Street palette, and also the So Jaded palette. Before the So Jaded palette came out, this was my favorite palette from ColourPop, and I really wanted to mention this one. I mean, it's a no-brainer when I mention this one, and this is the Sweet Talk palette from ColourPop. This is one of their smash hit palettes. Like, everyone was talking about this palette. Everyone was getting this palette. This is one of their best curated palettes they've ever done. It just has, again, such beautiful shades in here. For only having 12 shades in here, it's such a stunning palette. I just think it's the perfect springtime palette, but it's just, I don't know, when I look at this palette, it's so pretty. I love how they I know that this is when they first started putting a lot of pressed glitters in their palette, but when they did it with this one, it just like made sense, and it was just a fun twist on neutral shades. And these 2 glitters are so stunning, but they also put a Super Shock in here. And then the 2 lid shades that they put in here that were just their standard shimmer formula are so beautiful. And then the mattes in here are so good. And there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, there's still 7 mattes in this palette, but they're like the perfect mattes to create such beautiful looks with each of the shimmers. They coincide with the shimmers so well. Like the 2 pinks go perfectly with Garden Date. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? And then Melody goes so well with Work It and West Side, and that's what I'm wearing on my palette today. On my eyes today, I'm wearing this palette because I haven't used this palette too much since the springtime. I did use it like once last month, but I kind of wanted to just whip it out and use it today, and I was like, if I'm talking about palettes that I love, that I couldn't live without. I'm like, I should wear one of them because I was going to wear my Naked 3 palette today because I was going to wear that in my live stream on Friday, but everyone wanted to see the Storybook palette. So I was like, you know what? I really want to use this palette today and create a look with it. And honestly, I just have fallen back in love with it. It's so beautiful. I put Catch Me in the Crease as a transition. Then I used Work It in my crease. Then I used ICYMI as my defining shade. And then I put West Side and a little bit of Feel Free on the outer corners. And then I put Melody all over the lid, which is like my favorite shade in this palette. It's just such a beautiful shimmer. It's such a beautiful gold. I love it. I love how all I've swatched so far is colors from the Lime Crime palette, but I have a full review on the So Jaded palette, and I think I have a full review on the Venus XL, and I also have a full review on this palette as well, and I did a demo with this palette. That was the only video that I was able to do a demo in at the same time. So, but I love it. I just love this palette. It's beautifully curated. One of their best palettes ever, in my opinion. This was my favorite palette until the So Jaded palette came out, but I love it. It's just stunning, and it's just such a beautiful, like, curated palette. This is just one of their best palettes. If you try one ColourPop palette that I recommend in this video, it would be this one, 100%. I love the So Jaded palette. I love the Dream Street palette, but this one I feel like appeals to everyone because it's such a beautiful, different neutral palette that I feel like that's why it was such a smash hit, because it's just neutral, again, still sells, but it's like a different kind of neutral palette, and it's so beautiful. So I love this palette so much. And then the next one, I mean, these aren't in any specific order, so this is definitely another palette I couldn't live without, and it would be the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. This palette just knocked it out of the park for me. I love the gold palette, but if I had to choose between both of those, I would definitely choose this one. Because you guys know I am a warm tone neutral girl. I absolutely love warm tone eyeshadows. They're just my favorite to wear. But this one, of course, is full of warm toned shades, but they're just, again, it's such a beautifully curated, stunning palette. I know it's like not anything too innovative, but I've used the shit out of this, as you can tell. And I feel like you can never tell on camera how much someone actually uses something, but I've used this palette a ton, and I really, really did fall in love with this palette. The shimmers in here are stunning. I love this row of shimmers. They're like such beautiful shades. Dayspring and Agate are like my two favorite shades in the palette. And then these beautiful like berry tones. I really am getting into more berry tones lately. And I definitely want to do more of like a berry look with this palette at some point. I really want to whip out this palette and use it as well. Besides the Sweet Talk palette, I really want to use these two palettes more. Because I've only been able to use this palette again like once this past month. So I really just want to whip it out and use it again. But again, these are more like spring summer palettes for me. But this is also a stunning palette. I love it. The mattes in here are beautiful. I love the warm tone neutral shades in here. But then there's also, again, these beautiful berry tones, like these three shades. You can make such a beautiful look with those three shades. And then even the yellow is amazing. But the shimmers in here are so beautiful. Oh my god. But Agate is so beautiful. It's one of my favorite shades ever from Natasha Denona. And then Dayspring is so stunning. I swear swatches just don't do some shades justice sometimes. You just have to use them on your lid. This one's Agate and this one is Dayspring, and I just love both of them. So yeah, you guys know how much I love this palette, so I really don't want to talk about it too much, but this is a stunning palette as well, one of my favorites. So that's 5 so far. So let's talk about the next 5. And the next 5 are ColourPop and 2 other different brands. So let's just go through them. So I was thinking about mainstream brands besides Natasha Denona. I still love my Urban Decay, and the next two are going to be by Urban Decay. And I just think that these are their two best palettes. I didn't choose any Too Faced palettes. Honestly, I think Urban Decay makes way better eyeshadow palettes and have better quality eyeshadows. When you actually look at Too Faced, I don't think their quality of their eyeshadows is as good as their packaging. Like, their packaging is what draws you in. I mean, Urban Decay has bomb packaging too. But when I think about the cult classic favorite eyeshadow palettes, I would still have to go back to the Naked palettes. And this was like the first brand of eyeshadows and first series of eyeshadow palettes that I really fell in love with. But my favorite one has to be the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. And again, of course, you guys know I love neutral eyeshadows, and I love Urban Decay, and I love the Naked line, and you guys know how much I love warm tones. And this is like the perfect warm tone neutral palette to me. It's still one of my favorite palettes. So I have to go with this guy. I love it so much. So again, I do need to whip out this palette and use it again. But it's just so good. I know there's so many mattes in this palette, and it might look like a boring palette to you, but honestly, this is like one of the most perfectly curated warm tone palettes ever. It's just so good. I love the gradient effect that it kind of looks like when you look at it. That's why I kind of like Naked palettes, the way they're laid out, is like the gradient effect. It just makes you want to use it, and it's just so enticing, but I also love that it looks like, you know, matches. Like, I don't know, it just looks so cool to me. And the shimmers in here are stunning, and the mattes in here are beautiful. But when I think of a warm tone neutral palette, this has to be my favorite one. And I just love it. It's so good. I don't really have to say anything more. I think a bunch of people love this palette. And I don't know. It's just my favorite Naked palette. It's still my favorite Naked palette. And when I look at it, I just, you know, it's just an easy palette to use. You don't really have to think about it when you use it. It's just, you know that the mattes are going to work, and the shimmers are stunning. Scorched is my favorite shade in the palette. As you guys know, I have like a pattern, but I love like bronzy toned neutral eyeshadows, and you guys know I love gold as well. But I haven't picked one palette that really has like a standout gold to me in this video, except for one palette. But I love gold eyeshadows, but at the same time, like, I'm kind of thinking about the palettes that I know that I couldn't live without. So this is a great palette. Love it. You can create so many different looks with it. But the mattes in here really make the palette, and there's literally, I don't have to reach for any other palette when I use this because the mattes are just amazing. And this was the first Naked palette that had more mattes than shimmers, and I think they did an amazing job with the layout. So I just love this palette. It's amazing. I'm starting to get really hungry. I'm hoping my boyfriend will hit me up soon. Hold on one second. Okay, so far that is 6 palettes. So let's keep on going with Urban Decay. So the second Naked palette, I think you guys know what I'm going to choose, would have to be the Naked Honey palette. So let me just see what he said. Sorry, he's just annoying me. So, yeah, this would definitely be my other pick if I could hold it up right. You guys know how fast I fell for this palette. Like, literally the first time I used it, I was like, damn, this is what everybody's talking about. But the hype is real. I don't think I've seen one negative review on this palette, honestly. Maybe I'm just out of the loop. But this palette is beautiful. I think, again, Urban Decay put, like, a different twist on like, these kind of tones, and I didn't realize how much I really wanted, like, a golden toned neutral palette or, like, mustardy kind of palette. It's really not mustardy. It's more like honey tone, obviously, because it's a honey palette. Duh. Why did I say mustard? So these shades are just amazing, and I just love how they created this palette. Again, I do like or prefer more of the palettes that the Naked palettes have more mattes in. And these two are definitely the ones that have more mattes. The Cherry palette does too, but formula-wise, I think that the Heat palette and the Honey palette are just better. I love the Cherry palette as well, but these two palettes just really, I mean, the Cherry palette, I really do love that palette. But these two have a better formula to me, and the Naked Honey palette is just stunning. This would definitely be, like, my go-to neutral palette out of all of these palettes. It's just stunning. So these shimmers are beautiful. The mattes are beautiful. I really can't say anything else about it. Again, I have a full review on this palette, and I just love it. You guys know I love eyeshadow palettes. Golden and Honey are, like, my two favorite shades in the palette. Just the formula, they really stepped up the formula for this palette. It's just, there's something different about this formula in this palette that, I don't know. I think they really perfected their formula, and it's just the mattes blend so beautifully, and the shimmers are just stunning on the lid. So I would definitely have to pick this one too. And you have all your staple transitions and a staple brow bone highlight. You have these beautiful matte shades, and you have this beautiful outer corner shades, and then the rest you can just throw on the lid. And it's just literally stunning. I love this palette. So, alright, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. And these other three, honestly, these 6 palettes that I picked were the ones that I really, or 7 palettes are the ones I can't live without. These 3 I probably could, but I still wanted to mention them. So the first one, honestly, it surprised me that this is definitely a palette that I would definitely choose over other palettes in my collection. But this, again, is the best drugstore palette I've ever used. And again, you guys know I'm a sucker for warm tones, so I would have to say the Milani Pure Passion palette is one of my favorite palettes ever. It is so good, you guys. I don't want to blind you guys with the packaging, but just, again, such a beautifully curated palette. You have some staple mattes, and the shimmers are stunning in this palette. But the mattes, again, blend so beautifully, and the shimmers are beautiful. Again, a neutral palette you don't even have to think about. It's just freaking stunning. So the mattes in here I love, and the shimmer shades are just so beautiful. So yeah, I really don't have anything else to say about it. I just love it. So that's that. I really just want to get out of here and eat. I'm kind of getting a little bit cranky now because I'm hungry. So 2 more palettes to go with. The next one, the last 2 are from ColourPop. I mean, the fact that I have 5 ColourPop palettes in this video just shows how much I love them, but these would be the 5 ColourPop palettes that I would choose. So the next one would be the ColourPop It's a Princess Thing palette. The last 2 palettes are actually Disney palettes, because they do such an amazing job with the Disney collabs, and I freaking love this palette. Again, the formula in this palette is ridiculous. The mattes in this palette blend beautifully, and the shimmers are so stunning. Again, I feel like that this is a beautifully curated palette where you can have some staple neutral shades in here, but then if you want to play with some color, there's some safe colors in here. But they're beautiful. Enchanted Rose, stunning. Prince Charming, One Kiss, absolutely beautiful. The shimmers in here are insane. Like, literally insane. This one is Prince Charming and One Kiss. They're my 2 favorite shimmers in the palette, and they're so beautiful. Prince Charming, I just wore on my inner corners yesterday, and then the gold, One Kiss, That's like one of my favorite golds ever. But this is such a good palette, you guys. So if you guys were thinking about trying a Disney palette from ColourPop, this is still the best one. They knocked it out of the park with this one. And if you want something that you can use every day and then play with some color, and this silver is ridiculous, like ridiculous. It is so beautiful and metallic. Oh my god, it's so stunning. Like, look at that. It's like freaking gunmetal. It is such a stunning palette, and then I love Enchanted as well. This was like, I fell in love so hard with this palette when I first got it, and that one is Enchanted Rose. Ridiculous how pretty it is. But this was my favorite palette over Dream Street for quite a while, and it is amazing. As you guys can see, I've used the crap out of it, so I love this palette. And it's funny that all these palettes are ones that I haven't hit pan on, because the 4 palettes that I've hit pan on is Dose of Colors, Baked Browns, Anastasia, Modern Renaissance, which is, again, was one of my favorite palettes, but I feel like I've moved on from that palette. And I'm like, I could live without it now. It's so weird how your preferences change when you try, like, other formulas. I'm just like, why was that my favorite palette? And then the last one that I would have to choose, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, the formula from this palette just knocked it out of the park for me. And these have some beautiful shades in here. So I'd have to say the ColourPop Midnight Masquerade palette would be my last favorite palette from ColourPop. And my last palette I would have to mention in this video. Just the formula in here is so beautiful. And it might look like a boring palette to you, but the mattes in here are ridiculous. Some of the best mattes that ColourPop has ever done. They are so pigmented. Like, look at this Gaston shade and Quasimodo and Nutmeg. Oh my god. Look at that. It's ridiculous how pigmented they are. I know I'm swatching these on the side. They might look a little patchy, but they are so stunning on the lids. I mean, so stunning in the crease. And then the shimmers in here, oh my god, Mrs. Potts. Mrs. Potts. I have a love affair with Mrs. Potts. I thought I had a tissue in here. Mrs. Potts is the best shimmer in this palette, and it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful shimmer. Like this beautiful yellow gold. I'm filling up my hand with swatches, but again, the mattes in here are stunning. The lid shades are stunning. There's really not one dud in this palette for me. All the shades are amazing in it. And if you're a Disney lover, this palette is beautiful. So stunning. Love this palette. And then I just have 2 honorable mentions really quick, and then I need to get out of here so I can eat finally, because I haven't eaten since breakfast. And I did work out, so I think that's why I'm getting more hungry, because I didn't eat till like 12, but I'm getting really hungry. So the last 2 palettes that I just want to give an honorable mention to. So if I needed one shimmer palette in my collection, it would have to be the Jouer Skinny Dip palette. These are some of the best shimmers I've ever tried. I've raved about this palette before. I haven't used it in so long, but you need like those pops of shimmer in your life, and this would be the palette that I would choose. But I just wanted to mention it real quick as an honorable mention, but obviously, I didn't pick it because I can't do like a full look with it, but these shimmers are ridiculous. I've swatched these before. They are so freaking stunning. I feel like my light is just blinding you guys. That's better, right? Amazing palette. So if you guys are looking for some unreal shimmers, this is your palette. I know it didn't really get like its moment, but these shimmers are unreal, you guys. Like, amazing. I didn't realize how amazing they would be, because I was like, oh, everyone talks about Jouer, but they knocked this palette out of the park. I'm so glad I have it in my collection. I really need to whip it out and use it again. And then the last one would be the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts eyeshadow palette. I just wanted to give this an honorable mention as well. It wouldn't be like one of my palettes that I can't live without, but this palette is amazing. The mattes in here are stunning. The shimmers in here are amazing. They just blend so beautifully, and the shimmers are ridiculous in this palette. I really have to do a look with this again. I did whip it out and use it like last month or maybe the month before that, but I really want to do a look with this guy. But these are stunning as well. The mattes in here are ridiculously pigmented. This shade Air, you would just think it's like a matte peachy color, but seriously, it's so ridiculously pigmented. But I love this palette, so I just wanted to give it a little bit of an honorable mention. So yeah, that is it, you guys. Those are my favorite palettes ever and my top 10 favorite eyeshadow palettes. Basically, the 10 eyeshadow palettes I would keep. These would be the 10 that I would keep. So please let me know what your favorite ones were, but they're all like sitting here, and this is kind of like these are my cream of the crop favorites. So please like and subscribe, follow me on all my social media. Let me know below what your favorites are. I would love to know. Just leave like your holy grail or even your top 10. I would love to know, or your top 5. So let's talk about it in the comments below. So I love you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed my picks. And yeah, bye.